Thanks, Juliet. My name's Rohan Baird. I'm a senior hydrogeologist with the Department of Environment, Water and Natural Resources. I work within the groundwater team within the Science Monitoring Knowledge branch of DUNA. So DUNA, along with the Department of State Development, or DSD, are the key government agencies that are responsible for controlling water-related impacts associated with the mining industry. The mining industry has potential to generate significant wealth for the state, but careful groundwater management is really required to ensure that the resources are available for existing users and also for the environment. So within the science unit and the groundwater team, we provide detailed technical advice to DSD, and that forms a part of the overall decision-making process regarding mining development and regulation within South Australia. So the presentation today is going to focus mainly on mineral resources, but there's a similar process that exists for petroleum resources in the state. So I'm just going to start by giving a quick overview of the locations of some of the major mines in South Australia, and then talk about some of the key requirements that need to be included in mining lease proposals to get a mine up and running. So this slide just basically demonstrates the locations of the major mineral resources. The majority of them are located north of Port Augusta in the South Australian Arid Lands Natural Resource Management region, with fewer mines located on the Eyre Peninsula, York Peninsula and around Adelaide. The classification there is just based on the current status of the mine, with current economic conditions, probably more mines moving into a care and maintenance mode before the price of commodities increases. Also shown on the map is the location of the state's prescribed water resource areas and prescribed wells areas. And these are areas where there's generally very good water quality, and demand for that resource means that an allocation system has needed to be adopted in those areas. So I guess the point here is that there is some overlap between our most important groundwater resources and mining, and it just highlights the importance that we need to have good groundwater management and really understand these hydrogeological systems to ensure that there's no risks to our water resources. This is just a snapshot of the regulatory approach. As I said, DSD are the lead government agency in mining approvals in South Australia, but they also work closely with DUNA and the EPA in managing water-related impacts. The assessment pathway for a mine to get from the exploration stage through to operation is a staged approach, and the first key thing is the mining lease proposal, which is the MLP. If this is approved, then a PEPA, which is a program for environmental protection and rehabilitation, is required for the mine to operate. And then if a mine is operating, it comes under strict compliance reporting conditions to ensure that it's meeting its environmental outcomes. The snapshot here is just an image of some of the ministerial determinations and guidelines that define what needs to be included in a mining lease proposal and a PEPA. They can all be found on the DSD website if you're keen to have a look, and they contain information about groundwater, but the whole range of other mining aspects. So specific to groundwater, one of the key parts of the mining lease proposal is the description of the existing environment. And this is really important because it provides a basis from which change can be measured. So the key things that we are looking at in the description of the environment are a detailed understanding of the local and regional hydrogeology and the aquifers in the area, an understanding of the existing groundwater quality in the location of where mines are located. So is it freshwater, is it brackish or saline? Another key thing is water-dependent ecosystems, or referred to as groundwater-dependent ecosystems. And a starting point for this assessment is the National Atlas of Groundwater-Dependent Ecosystems. This is often used as a starting point for assessment, but often requires further ground truthing and further technical investigations to understand those systems. We also need to really understand what groundwater uses around a mine site, so that existing users like stock users, domestic and irrigation users aren't impacted, and the proximity to water resource areas, which is the map I showed earlier. So all this information is pulled together by mining proponents and put together in the mining lease proposal, and a key part of what DUNA do is review that information, make sure it's representative of all the available data, and the interpretations of that data is correct. One of the key things we look for is baseline data, and as I said before, this is really important because we need to monitor a point from which change happens. So it's very difficult to prove or disprove any impacts without good baseline data, and that should occur, ideally several years before mining. This illustration is just not related to a mine site, but just shows a hydrograph where there's good baseline data. You can pick out seasonal trends and longer-term variations. So some of the potential impacts that we look out for can occur to groundwater quantity and also to groundwater quality. Impacts can occur to existing users, to GDEs and water-dependent ecosystems. Impacts can be made to groundwater surface water interactions and also into aquifer leakage where we're pumping from a certain aquifer. We're also looking out for impacts to groundwater quality, which can occur from facilities on mine sites such as tailing storage facilities or waste rock dumps, which can potentially cause issues for the groundwater. And another one which we commonly hear about is acid mine drainage, which occurs where there's pyrite in the host rock, and when that's exposed to oxygen and water, an acid solution can form. The illustrations here are just from the historic Brakunga mine site, which has now undergone historic rehabilitation to take care of those issues. Another key component of that mining lease proposal is a description of the operations which have the potential to impact on groundwater. The key ones we're looking at for are dewatering, which is required if the resource is located below the groundwater level. Also groundwater supply, if supplementary water is needed for a mine site for processing or dust suppression or other things. And also changes to the landform, which can alter recharge and runoff characteristics and change the hydrogeological regime. Another key component we need to look at is closure of a mine, and that's really important to ensure that it's returned to a stable, physically stable and chemically stable landform. One of the approaches that's used to assess these impacts is groundwater modeling, and it's basically often done in a risk-based approach where the more complex numerical groundwater models are required where environmental receptors are located close to the mine site, and we need a greater degree of accuracy to assess those impacts. The guidelines for modelling set different classifications for models, and that's in the Australian standards for groundwater modelling. We also need to look at the cumulative impacts from, say, dewatering and water supply. And the model outputs is something that's very important because it's able to predict the impacts at a specific location at a specific point in time, and different scenarios can be run to look at the different impacts. The illustrations here are from a mine in the far north of SA, which is the Challenger gold mine, and the one below is just a conceptual drawdown around a mine pit. So if a mine site moves to an MLP stage and the pepper stage and is up and running, there's detailed monitoring and compliance that is required to demonstrate the environmental outcomes. So for example, for groundwater, environmental outcome might be no impact to existing users outside of the mining lease proposal. Those outcomes are linked to leading indicator criteria, which are used to provide an early warning that those environmental outcomes might not be met, and that'll trigger a certain management response. So the monitoring data that's collected as a part of the operations, Juna plays a key role in reviewing those plans to ensure that the spatial distribution of wells is adequate for monitoring, that they're in the correct aquifers, that the frequency of monitoring is adequate, and that the sampling procedures are up to best practice. That data is reported in compliance reports and is assessed by Juna and the Department of State Development to ensure that those environmental outcomes are being met. The illustration here is a hydrograph from a well, and as you can see, it's sitting well above its leading indicator criteria. So look, in summary, good, careful groundwater management is required in the mining industry to be sure that the resource is available for existing users and for the environment. The broad principles are that there will be no change to the highest use category for all water resources, and there will be no significant impact to existing users and water-dependent ecosystems, and monitoring and compliance are the tools that are used to demonstrate this. Thank you.
So we've got a couple of minutes for questions. Thank you.
How can you give assurance monitoring when, as I understand, there are only 2 logging trucks in the whole of South Australia for the government? And also, well integrity is a massive issue even before you get into the mining. As we are aware, hydrogen sulfide and anaerobic bacteria are only 2 of a number of things that break down well integrity, and the wells do not go away even though they've been decommissioned, they're still under the ground. So how can you give that impression that you've got assurance of monitoring when it's not even done at the moment? It's impossible.
So the monitoring is a requirement of the mining company. Not.
I mean, after the companies have also been gone, there's thousands of these drill holes.
Yeah, so that needs to be taken care of in a closure and completion plan for a mine site, and that's really addressed throughout that process.
Other questions? At the back there.
Quite often, I'm guessing that the mine might go to areas which haven't had a lot of monitoring in the past or haven't got a lot of information about groundwater ecosystems or anything like that. So is part of the preparation, is that to gather that information as well, or you just go on existing information?
Detailed site-specific investigations will need to be undertaken to gather that information where it's not available, and baseline data will need to be collected before any operations commence. So yes, there are areas where there isn't much data, but that's the onus of the mining company to collect that data and provide it to DSD, JUNA and EPA, and we validate that data is appropriate.
Right. Okay, so thank Rohan.
No worries.
And now Rohan will be talking about